It is important to say we may not know the final result of the presidential election tonight. States have different processes, different deadlines for counting and reporting results. And of course, there's always the potential for challenges to the voting tallies.
But before a reminder, we are reporting results from the Associated Press. And they will call a race when their analysis shows it is mathematically impossible for the trailing candidate to overtake the leading candidate once all of the votes are counted.
Harris's campaign is feeling really good tonight, Geoff. They've been sharing some of the statistics that they think shows that Harris could very well be on the pathway to 270. Specifically, they said that there is high Puerto Rican turnout in Philadelphia. That's what some of the campaign sources highlighted, and they think that that bodes well for them because of the fact that Donald Trump ended the last few weeks with that racist and sexist Madison Square Garden rally where the comedian made the racist joke about Puerto Ricans. So they believe that high turnout amongst Puerto Ricans could very well help Harris in a city like Philadelphia. They also pointed to high student college turnout.
Simply hired to go out and do it. The second concern that's been raised about this relationship is that Elon Musk has been, similar to Donald Trump, putting out some of the most debunked and repeated false allegations about voter fraud and cheating in this election. And there's all this ongoing question as to whether or not Donald Trump, if, let's say, this does not go for him tonight or in the days coming, whether or not he will concede the election if it is fair. And Trump was asked this when he went to vote today in West Palm Beach and said, yes, if it's fair, I will. But in the hours since, he has continued to promote baseless claims that there is cheating in the swing states, particularly in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. And having Elon Musk sitting next to him, who has been parroting those same claims on the enormous social media platform that he owns, X, makes a lot of people wonder whether or not Trump will in fact honor the outcome of this election. So it's a legitimate ongoing question that people are genuinely concerned about.
And William, we saw even Republican officials in Pennsylvania having to come out to debunk some of that information. Former President Trump was talking about secretaries of state in a number of battlegrounds having to work to counter some of that misinformation already. But you probably heard Laura reporting earlier on some of what she's hearing from Harris campaign sources about North Carolina and Georgia in particular, two states we think could give us some kind of early indication of which way this night is going. If former President Trump loses both of those, his path to 270 becomes much more difficult. Have you heard anything from campaign sources or anyone in Trump's team about how they're feeling about those two states?
The word that they are putting out is that they are confident. But so far, the campaign is bullish and confident that those things are going their way tonight.
After the Puerto Rican island of garbage, whatever joke at the Madison Square Garden that we heard, it mobilized. And from what we're hearing initially, I think we'll find that Allentown, Reading, which significant Puerto Rican populations, found that there was higher turnout than expected among those populations. When you move down,
those are people who are open. And to the atmosphere of violence, we need to recognize that this atmosphere of violence that we are contending with is because one of the two candidates for president throughout his entire campaign has invoked violent rhetoric right up until the last couple of days. And so we are here because a person who used to be president of the United States and should know better and should be about bringing us together has decided not to do that aggressively.
Let's shift our it's counted, but in the order that they're counted, it could give an impression that one side is doing better than the other.
Yes, although I don't think we're going to have that to the degree we did in 2020 because obviously it was a pandemic and so many people turned in their ballots by mail. And in many states that really don't have a history of vote by mail, and Pennsylvania is a perfect example of this, this was a whole new experience for them to try to count all of those ballots. And what we knew, because Donald Trump then in 2020 was saying things like, we need to not vote by mail because it's rigged. So his voters came to the polls, Democrats voted by mail, and so there was a mirage. The Election Day vote got counted early, so you saw this red, and then as the ballots were counted that were mailed in, it became less red. That is not expected this time around. I think we're going to be able to see. We do have to pay very close attention, though, to when they talk about 65% of the vote is in or 72% of the vote is in. And anybody
Seems to be urging former President Trump to not come out early and make any kind of premature declaration.
Yes, I think Republicans were burned, felt burned, some of them, by more than burned by what happened in 2020. And we know there's been a huge division in the Republican Party with most elected Republicans sticking with the former president. But I don't think that means that they are comfortable with, certainly with what happened on January the 6th. And I don't think any of them want to see a repeat of that.
Yeah.
I know. We used to talk so much about Florida. Remember those days?
Once upon a time.
Right. But, there are some interesting counties here, and we are getting some results in. 76% actually of the expected vote in now from Florida. And one place I want to look is Osceola County. This is one of 3 majority Hispanic counties in the state of Florida. It's an important place for Democrats and also largely a Puerto Rican community. You heard Laura talk about, you guys have talked about that as well. Let's show how this compares to what's gone on in the past. We've got Harris right now with 76% of the expected vote in this county, up by just 1 point. That is definitely a decrease from what Biden got in this county and Clinton. Now, there's still 24% of the vote left, but in this heavily Puerto Rican county, this is probably a disappointment at this point. Again, we still have more results to come in from Florida. Let's look at
that the country was on the wrong track. A lot of people. They were also afraid about the threats to democracy. And we cannot discount the role that is playing in the people's thinking and also reproductive freedom. And so you put those two together, and I'll be interested to see if those two issues swamp the sort of dyspepsia in the country about we're on the wrong track. And maybe people think we're on the wrong track because reproductive freedom is in jeopardy and the threats to democracy.
Yeah,
And Harris is 35. Back to you, John.
And John, in the meantime, I understand Donald Trump has been making unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud in and around Philadelphia. Bring us up to speed and give us a fact check.
He went on social media earlier this afternoon, said that there was massive fraud or massive cheating, is his words, going on in Philadelphia, and that law enforcement was on the way. It's a lot of ballots are going to be coming in late, and that could delay things even more. There is some confidence in this state that they can get all the mail-in ballots counted by midnight, which would be a big step forward from 2020. But then the in-person vote has to be counted.
Very quickly, because that was really important. Think about how Trump closed this, because it was awful. I mean, those last 10 days, not only that Madison Square Garden event, which got its own, but then the enemy within. We got the shooting of journalists or whatever the heck he was talking about. Women, whether they like it or not, votes are rigged. You had all kinds of nonsense of antics around Arnold Palmer and microphones and all kinds of stuff that was it affirmed for a lot of people, this is not what we want in office. And I think it was just an awful close for him because, as Kevin says, in a normal environment, I think we were talking about in an earlier panel about the economy, you would have just focused on an economic contrast. You talk about your vision and feeling good about whatever Trump felt about his economy. And he could do none of that. And he had lack of discipline, and I do think it hurt him in a big way.
Yeah, and that's what
I'm really interested in this question about how much voters are affected by the kind of language that he uses, and these late in the campaign and even earlier in the campaign, frankly. Harsh rhetoric, ugly language. I don't know if the exit polls, you all are more familiar. Amy, I'm looking at you. Are they going to tell us anything about whether that turn some people off? Because as I travel the country and talk to people, so many people who are voting for Trump saying they plan to vote for him, I'd ask them, well, what do you think about what he says about X and Y? And they would say, well, that's the way he talks. I still like the way he handled the economy, or I like what he's doing about immigration. So I'm really interested in getting inside people's decision-making on that.
Yeah.
And that's something we'll learn.
That Madison Square Garden rally, though, to use your phrase, really did get liberals mad. And it's interesting because we're living in this universe where the competition for attention is so fierce and people's perceptions of these candidates, more so with Donald Trump, is so calcified that it's hard for really anything to break through. But what that insult comic said about Puerto Rico really broke through, Jonathan. And we'll see if the degree of the blowback tonight. But why do you think that resonated when, John Kelly saying that Donald Trump fits the textbook definition of a fascist you could say didn't resonate in the same way.
It didn't resonate in the same way, but I do think it resonated. Look, that Madison Square Garden rally was just a hate fest from beginning to end. And the fact that you had this comic there to say these jokes that were racist, xenophobic, sexist, and that's the beginning of the night. And then it just kept going in that tone for the rest of the night, including from the headliner of the evening, Donald Trump. And for that to be part of the closing message, and I'm with Judy, I would like to know how much this language impacts the way people are going into the voting booth and impacts the way they're thinking about who they want to lead them. I mean, I think that's also why this election is such a stark contrast. Do you want someone who is saying, I'm here for everybody, I want us to work together, or someone who says, there are all these problems and everything's going to hell and it's that person's fault, that person's fault, that person's fault, and I'm the one who's going to fix it. And none of your proposals don't speak to unity, do not speak to bringing us together. And so, I think that's liberals getting mad, is one thing, but I also think that Madison Square Garden concerned Americans. And let's not put the labels on it, but I do think a lot of Americans looked at that and thought, what the entire hell is happening, if they hadn't been paying attention up until that point.
And we will see.
Yeah, I have been out at the polls a lot today. One of the things that you hear over and over again is abortion. I heard that from men. I heard that from women. I've been pretty much exclusively in Philadelphia, but it's really top of mind here. The other thing I've heard, and I was in, sort of Republican areas of the city as well as Democratic areas, the economy was the big one. Those were the two issues that I kept hearing over and over again.
Yeah. I know that you and the vice president are close. Have you spoken with her this evening or recently? How is she feeling about her chances, and how is she really feeling about this moment?
I haven't spoken to her today, but she's feeling good. I mean, just think about it, Geoff. She's in 107 days. She changed the entire dynamic of politics in this country. She gave it everything she had. We left it all on the field. She feels good about her work. She feels good about the work of the campaign, and very, very optimistic tonight.
It relates to bodily autonomy that was later removed for their daughters and granddaughters.
Certainly it's a major issue, but I think that as I've been looking at exit polls, more women are saying that democracy is their number one issue. Democracy and then freedom. Yes, it's going to be important because no one wants to live in a nation where we are rolling back the ability to control our lives, our families' lives. No one wants to live in that kind of a nation. And so I think that it is going to be important, but it's not the only important issue. And so I'm really glad that she's talked about freedom of choice, but also about what kind of country do we want to live in, Geoff?
The one that leaps out at me here is Loudoun County, Virginia.
Yeah.
Which is an exurb of Washington. It used to be the fastest growing county in the country. It's now solidly Democratic. Harris is up by 16. But compared to 4 years ago, Trump is performing 9 points better. And so if we see a lot of red arrows in places like Loudoun County, then that's a warning sign for Harris.
Jonathan?
What? After that.
Can we also clarify here, these are places where you say most of the vote is already in. Right. It would tend to come in
It's
faster in some of these rural counties,
They're rural
correct?
counties, but Loudoun is a straight-up suburban county.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I look at the fact that Trump is doing better in Loudoun and better in these red counties already. I can't remember who said this, who said it on another network, that really what's happening tonight is America is basically on trial, in that we're going to find out who we are through this election. And the fact that despite the things that Donald Trump said on the campaign trail, the things that he's promised on the campaign trail, a lot of things that are concerning to millions of people, and he's still getting more votes than he did the last go round, that to me is more concerning than, the vice president's not doing as well, say, even though she's up plus 16, even though, it's not as good as 2020. And so for me, that's what I'm looking at and what I'm most concerned about what I'm about to learn about the American people through this election.
Yeah, a lot of questions about what's going on and what's going to happen. I have to say,
With about a third of the vote in from Washtenaw County, we're seeing her underperform by a lot. Even Hillary Clinton in Michigan, again, still many more votes to come in, and we'll just keep following this closely.
All right, that's our Lisa Desjardins. Man, guys, I need my coffee. Over at the super screen. In the meantime, we've got Vista Sense now. We're coming up on 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. What are you hearing from the campaign about where things stand so far?
Yeah, Amna. So Harris's campaign is still exuding cautious optimism. They aren't, reading too much into these early numbers, but they are.
In the meantime, now we can make another race call at this hour. The state of Ohio has gone for former President Donald Trump. We know, as Judy mentioned as well, 10 states have different ballot measures related to abortion rights tonight. Florida is among them, and we can now report in Florida there's no wins on the right to abortion there. Abortion rights will not be enshrined in the state constitution. It got 57% support, but fell short of the 60% needed. And Amy Walter, this is a noteworthy moment in many ways because so far.
And it is also just a reminder. I mean, it was not that long ago we were talking about who was going to win Florida. This was the bellwether of bellwethers, and how dramatically it has shifted in such a short period of time from a real toss-up state to one where Republicans have just been really dominant up and down the ticket.
It's interesting. We have one more race call to share with you. Donald Trump has won the state of Texas with its 40 electoral votes. Let's take a look at.
While we're here, let's do a quick check-in on Pennsylvania, the big one. 25% of the vote in. Harris is still retaining her lead. But as I say, we will just keep watching it carefully.
Lisa Desjardins, thank you so much. Always good to get a deeper look at Wisconsin there. Amy.
That these campaigns actually matter.
What they are breaking.
Well, you know this about me. I'm interested in class politics. As much as there's gender politics to discuss, class politics is always at the top of my mind. And it pains me to watch, more black working class people, more Latino working class people, at least by exits. And I think maybe we'll see tonight moving away from the Democratic Party. It's not great. We have to analyze how and why that's happening. I think you could win without them, but I think it's better that we win with them. And one of the reasons is because the Democratic Party has long been believed and understood to be the protectors of government, the executors of government, believers in government. And to believe in government right now, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with it, feeling the government is corrupt and broken and not delivering in a.
Well, the campaign, again, Jeff, is still being very patient, very calm, and they are saying that, again, they are seeing good suburban support, specifically when they're looking at Georgia. Yes, Donald Trump might be up right now, but they are saying that in some of the larger suburban counties, they're feeling good. They say, the campaign says, that Harris is currently overperforming Biden's 2020 margin in those suburban counties.
How would you describe the mood in the room? What are you hearing from campaign officials?
The mood here is very, very positive. I mean, I haven't been able to poll everybody here in the room, but the sense you get walking around and talking to voters is that the news keeps getting better and better and better for them.
We have coming in. Let's take a quick look at where we are in Pennsylvania with the vote. This key state. 55% of the vote. Trump is up 51 to 48, but we do have some big counties to come in still. And let's look at the percentages here. Philadelphia, only 45% of the vote in. This is a place where you see Harris running up the total. There are thousands more votes for her here that have not been counted yet. So even though it's close, there are some big areas still to come in here in Pennsylvania.
Agree with that?
A little, mostly. Yeah. But I do think Trump is overperforming. You look at these stats, Georgia with 93% of the vote in, he's up by 3. North Carolina, he's up by 3. Pennsylvania, he's up by 3. Michigan, he's up by 4. Wisconsin, he's up by 2. So that looks to be like overperforming. In Ohio, we talked earlier in the night about Sherrod Brown. He's in real trouble. So, I think he won Texas by certainly more than I expected. So you'd have to say that his strength is is bigger than I thought it was. His strength we expected him to gain among Hispanics with some of these numbers out of places like Michigan. His gains among Hispanics are kind of eye-popping if the exit polls are to be believed. So I'd have to say it's a long way to go, but right now it's less close than I thought it'd be.
Jonathan, about 30 seconds left before we go to a break, but what do you make of where we are?
Well, I'm still waiting for all the votes to come in.
Yeah.
And it's one thing for 93% of the vote to be in, but it's another thing if it's 50-something% of the vote in, and then where's that remaining vote? And so that's what we have to keep our eyes on.
We will keep our eyes on, not get ahead of the calls as they are made. It comes down to math and facts, everybody. However, at this time, we're going to take a short break so PBS stations can report. And welcome back to PBS News special live coverage on election night. I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Geoff Bennett. It is 11 p.m. Eastern, and polls have closed in 4 more states. We can call the state of Idaho with its 4 electoral votes for Donald Trump at this hour.
We can also call the state of California that's gone to Vice President Harris with its 54 electoral votes. As well,
Indiana, he struck an optimistic note for his party's chances tonight. Take a listen.
I think in a little bit we're going to go to Mar-a-Lago, I think, and be down there with President Trump. But I think at the end of the day, at the end of the night, when they tabulate all this, I am very hopeful that we're going to have not only a larger majority in the House to make my job easier, but we retake the Senate and the White House as well. I think that's what's going to happen.
All right, let's shift our focus back to our panel. And we should say, Amy Walter, that there's no data right now to suggest that what the speaker said is actually going to happen, that the Republicans will have a larger majority. We just don't know enough to know that yet.
We don't. And in fact, everything that we're seeing right now sort of lines up with what our expectations were. Nothing has been out of the ordinary. So it has really been all about these 22 to 25 seats. None of them have been called yet. It'd be great if 1 or 2 could. But right now, they're sort of lining up where we expected. And if those break disproportionately for Republicans, then yes, they could expand their majority, but it would not be a majority that is like huge. It would get like maybe an 8 seat, or instead of what they have a 4 seat, or a 9 seat instead of a 4 seat, right? So it's still it's
understood.
Yeah, we're still going to get the coffee flowing at the desk.
Seth, what are you paying closest attention to at this hour, both in terms of the balance of power in the Congress, but also in the presidential race?
Well, the blue wall is called the blue wall for a reason. Yeah. And we are living the blue wall. It's the blue wall or bust, looks like, for Kamala Harris, and we'll take a little while to figure out Philadelphia vote, obviously, for Pennsylvania, and see how close that is as we get later into tonight. And then the margins in Michigan and Wisconsin. Kevin and I were just talking about it. I feel fine about Michigan and Wisconsin. So Pennsylvania, we'll see how it goes at the end here.
Campaign watch headquarters tonight over at Howard University. So, Laura, I understand Jen O'Malley Dillon has told campaign staff that, as you know, she said all along, this is going to be a close race that comes down to a handful of states, and that she said that she feels pretty good about how things are shaping up this evening. Do I have that right?
That's right, Jeff. Jen O'Malley Dillon sent a memo, to campaign staff that we've obtained. And in that memo, she says that it was always going to come down to the blue wall states, even though they're still waiting as votes trickle in the Sun Belt. And she says that they feel good about what they're seeing, specifically in Pennsylvania. Jen O'Malley Dillon says that that the campaign overperformed turnout expectations in Philadelphia, that they overperformed early vote expectations in Bucks County, Jeff.
And just to pull back the curtain a little bit, Laura, a lot of times when campaigns send those memos to staff that are also shared with reporters, they are meant for public consumption. So you have to imagine that Jen O'Malley Dillon and the Harris campaign also want that message to get out to Harris supporters and Democrats across the country. How much of that message, based on your reporting and your sourcing, is spin, and how much of that is you? Are you okay?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I think I need to get a little
That's okay.
drink of water.
But how much of that, if you, okay. So I'll go to our old campaign hands. When you get a message like that, when a campaign sends out a message like that, how much of that is spin and
It was directed at you, Jeff. You, MSNBC, CNN, a bunch of media pundits who, they're trying to say, don't start counting too early and suggesting that there's an outcome here. Give us an opportunity to make sure all the votes are counted, which is absolutely fair. And she's giving you the tea leaves of where they'd be looking. So yeah, that was intended for you more than the campaign staff.
Yeah,
Okay.
that memo was not obtained. It was sent out so that it would be sent. It would be sent out to staff, so it would be leaked right to the press.
Okay.
So the message spin at this point, and we are now just past 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. We're, just as a reset for our viewers, we do not yet have race calls in those key battleground states we are tracking, and where the presidential race will be decided. So, David, your theory before we went to the last break here is that Trump is overperforming. You're hearing the pushback from the Harris campaign here saying they're actually overperforming in states that are in parts where they know that they're traditionally strong. And is it just too early to say?
Well, it is too early to say, but we have some actual results. I mean, 93% in Georgia and 68, 80% in some of these states. If I could ask our two campaign veterans, when people give us this spin, do you secretly know that it's just spin, or have you persuaded yourself that oh yeah, we're winning no matter what?
Or is it actually true?
I've never heard a campaign operative tell me our internal polls are just terrible for us. It's always our internal.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not hearing we're winning. I'm hearing we think we're doing well where we thought we would do well, but it's still too early to say. And in some cases, we still know the large metro areas, which tend to come in later and in larger batches, will tend to break Democratic, right? Not to get ahead of where anything is. But
David, I didn't hear a ton of spin, but maybe the one thing that I did hear, if we get Laura back, is that it was always the blue wall, right? That wasn't always the blue wall. We obviously, I mean, even just yesterday, I think David Plouffe was suggesting that we have to see a path to victory in all 7 of the battlegrounds. That obviously isn't going to necessarily be the case. But the blue wall is really critical. There's no doubt that Democrats have focused on it all the way through. So I'm not sure it was a ton of spin, but certainly maybe a reframing of the evening right
now.
Well,
I would say, David.
In terms of spin, Geoff, look, the campaign has gotten a little bit more quiet lately than they were earlier in the night. That's just that's the facts. But Jen O'Malley-Dillon, as the chair of Harris's campaign, is trying to project some calm here. Even yesterday, when she was talking to reporters, was saying that things were always going to be tight, despite some of their confidence that Harris did have a pathway in the 7 battlegrounds. They were all along saying that things were going to be narrow, that the margins were going to be tight. I was texting with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell just a moment ago, a congresswoman from Michigan, who in 2016 had warned about Michigan and Hillary Clinton's chances there. Debbie Dingell said that she was nauseously optimistic still and that it was going to be tight, but she wasn't worried just yet. And that's kind of the sense that I'm getting from a number of Democrats, those here, those elsewhere, that they are trying to be as calm and patient as possible and still feel as though there is a pathway for her in those blue wall states and when Nevada comes in.
Nauseously optimistic is something I've heard from other Democrats as well. Laura Barron-Lopez.
In recent weeks, when it looked like Kamala Harris might have some momentum, you hear more of that talk from from former President Trump then. So now, does this suggest that he may be winning? He's feeling better, feeling more confident, as William was reporting. So he doesn't need to put those allegations out there, which, by the way, most of or all of which were unfounded. There was no evidence of any fraud that anybody could find. I mean, we've got people all over the country looking in every state and every voting jurisdiction. So what was it based on in the first place?
Well, the other thing we've heard repeatedly from him is just continued election denialism from 2020. And Jonathan, when we go back to this Arizona Senate race, and we talked about candidate quality, Carrie Lake, the Republican candidate there, who's continued to say that the 2020 election was stolen. And
right, it's not translating at the ballot box. It seems in Arizona, but you look at polling of Republicans, and the fact that a majority of Republicans believe that the 2020 race that Donald Trump won or was stolen or was irregular is quite concerning. But you were just talking about, and just had a brain freeze. What were we just talking
about? Trump's messaging.
Trump. Donald Trump is probably the most transparent person in politics. And so when he's frothing about cheating and fraud, and all the final weeks of his campaign, he didn't feel good. He thought he was losing. And the fact that he's gone quiet on social media, I don't take that as... He's probably looking at the New York Times needle, which is sitting there in the red and thinking, okay, and whatever data he's getting, and, well, I don't have to do this anymore. But I suspect as we go later into the night, we might see him gin it back up. And if he starts doing something on his social media site or doing things on Twitter, that could also be a sign.
David, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I give him time. You know, he'll say something stupid. I mean, you know, Kamala Harris hit him at the end for fascism. And I thought that was not the right way to go at him, because to me, the problem with Donald Trump is not too much order, but too much chaos. And so I think the main threat of a Trump presidency is it'll just be not only chaotic the way it was in sort of a shambolic way in the first term, but now that we have global threats, chaos in the United States is a truly terrible thing. And so I thought they should have hit him. He's just out of control chaos. You want chaos on your life every day? You want chaos around the world? Because in my view, the American electorate tends to vote for the candidate they associate with order.
Well,
that was the Nikki Haley argument, wasn't it? He's bringing chaos. He will bring chaos.
But also the vice president said, you know, he's unhinged, he's erratic. I mean, saying exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, which raises the question. I mean, in your view, what accounts for the durability of Donald Trump as a public figure?
A large percent of Americans think elites have betrayed them. I mean, his core story resonates. And if you get your core story right, then the facts don't matter as much. And I think he's got that core story right. Though that's a subject which, if he wins, we're way ahead of ourselves right now. But if he wins, that's a subject a lot of us really have to do some deep thinking about. Why is his strength so durable? And why, with the Democrats, with all the strength they have, why have they been unable to really deliver a blow?
We have a key race call to share with you. Donald Trump has won the state of North Carolina with its 16 electoral votes.
And to me, I'm mystified in some ways, simply because we're talking about a twice impeached, 4 times indicted, convicted on 34 felony counts former president. That's one bucket. Then in another bucket, you have all of the things he's been saying on the campaign trail that gets to the decency that the woman was talking about in that last report, and how she wanted to vote for Vice President Harris because she didn't like that Madison Square Garden rally. I am mystified that despite all of that, he's gaining support compared to 2020. And it gets back to something I said earlier at some point, one of the hours ago, that who are we as a country? And we're starting to find out. And from what I'm seeing right now, I'm not sure I like it.
Well, Judy, this is
a minuscule portion of the population, and I think this gets to my bigger issue, that hammering away at transgender people, promising a mass deportation plan without talking about how are you going to distinguish between who's here legally and who's here illegally. The disruption and chaos that he is promising for the country is stultifying. And that's why I am mystified by why we are here. Not saying that anything has happened and that the race has been called or anything, right. But again, we're about to find out about half the country was down with this.
And Democrats have put forward the people Democrats have chosen to put those arguments forward haven't made the sale yet. We don't know what's going to happen tonight.
Fast forward to the current moment, you cannot draw a through line to the message that he is trying to convey to the American people. It was objectively dark and undisciplined. So is it less about what he is saying and more about what he embodies? Is that the draw
Geoff,
for people?
I disagree with you there.
Harris has been at the top of the ticket. We have spoken at length and in great detail about this campaign that they had to kind of get going, shift over from one candidate to the other, message discipline. They seemed pretty nimble, had a good rollout. But I think there is a question here. Had Biden dropped out sooner, would we be in a different position now? What do you think?
You know, I don't know. I'm going to deal with the campaign that we have. And I want to remind everyone that, because I think this conversation seems to be drifting into she lost and let's diagnose, let's do an autopsy on.
We are nowhere near that right
exactly.
now.
We are nowhere correct. We are nowhere near that. And so I think the vice president has run a fantastic campaign, given that it's just been 107 days and what she's been able to do in that time. I find it interesting that the YouTube world is dominated by conservative voices, Trump voices, which gets to a point I wanted to make, which is in terms of people getting their news, that there's a whole right-wing echo chamber that amplifies all of the misinformation and disinformation that's going out there to the American people. And Fox News, the cable channel, the #1 cable channel in the country by multiples. When I look at my ratings for my show on MSNBC, I don't even bother to see if I beat Fox. I look to see if I beat CNN, because Fox is way out ahead, and that's where people are getting their news. And I also think that I wondered if people would be unwilling to tell pollsters that they didn't want to vote for a woman and didn't want to vote for a Black woman and South Asian woman. And so, again, this is why I'm looking at this, because we can't just say that, oh, her economic message wasn't right, or, oh, she didn't speak to this particular constituency about fill-in-the-blank issue. Could it be that the country still has an issue with a woman in the top job in the nation, if not the world? Even though our allies and a lot of our peers have had women leaders.
Judy, Kamala Harris had been chosen. Would she have run a different campaign? She ran to the, it's not run. This election's not over. She has run a campaign to the middle. She has not emphasized her gender, her race. She is, in fact, just kind of jumps over those questions when they've come up. She's
a test case for the Harris campaign. And it was 2019.
And it was 2019.
And there's not very much there that made us think this would be a tremendous national candidate who would be able to, even win a Democratic primary if Joe Biden had dropped out earlier. And now I think what we've seen with some of the numbers here tonight and some of the underperformance is just how real that test case applied at a national scale in a general.
I don't think that's. I don't think
I
that's
didn't cover
fair.
that campaign. I don't think that's an.
That's not apples and apples. Yeah. I mean, also because remember in 2020,
primaries make you stronger, and she didn't go through primary.
Well, fine, but again, she got out of the race because anyone paying attention to that race, as long as Joe Biden was in the race, he was going to take the base of the party, and that's African American voters. And so she looked at the handwriting on the wall and got out. But you can't use you cannot use her failed run in 2019 and hold it against her after watching this incredible campaign she's run now. If she was such a disaster,
is it incredible?
But Kevin, if she was such a disaster,
and can you not take it?
I'm sorry.
You absolutely can. You can take 2019 and apply it here. I mean, did she run an incredible race?
If 2019, if she were running the race she ran in 2019, we would not be having this conversation right now.
We should turn to Laura Barron-Lopez. She is actually with the Harris.
We're here at Howard University, and the crowd has quieted a little bit as the night has gone on. But every time they see a state called for Harris, they roar back to life. At one point, they did call for the DJ to start playing rather than listening to some of the results come in. But the crowd is still going here as they hold out hope that Harris can succeed by winning the blue wall states as well as Nevada. But when it comes to the Democratic sources that I'm texting so far, a lot of the Democrats are still cautiously optimistic. None of them are saying just yet that they feel as though they're feeling ghosts of 2016. They say they're rejecting that this is like the Javits Center and Hillary Clinton's run. Right now, I was texting with a Democratic House member in Nevada who is extremely confident that Harris will win Nevada. So they're really looking to that western state, to the Latinos in that state, which are different than the Latinos on the eastern in the eastern states. And again, it really is going to seem like it's coming down to whether or not Harris's campaign was able to use their extensive ground game, which many had seen as far more extensive than Trump's, to drive up turnout in Milwaukee, in Detroit, and in Philly, and that is what they're looking to right now.
And Laura, I don't
Donald Trump right now, but they aren't saying that they think it's gone just yet. So they're still right now, some of them are starting to admit that they're a little bit nervous, but they're trying to project as much calm as possible, reminding people here what it was like in 2020 when, at this point, some of these states were looking as though they were favoring Donald Trump, and it wasn't until into Wednesday and beyond when things started to shift for Democrats.
Wall, what are you hearing from your Trump campaign sources?
We're hearing the exact opposite. Incredible sense of optimism. I mean, before North Carolina was called, the Trump campaign officials I'm in touch with were saying, this is clearly going to go for us. They believe Georgia is the same. They also still believe that the numbers that they are seeing in Pennsylvania indicate that that is nearly a lock for them. And they are also seeing all of these slow chipping away at the blue wall states, that every time there's updates to that, there are cheers that come out of the crowd. So very, very upbeat and strong and growing crowd here at the Trump campaign.
Absolutely. So the question now is not, of course, who will be in charge in the Senate, but what will be the majority for them. Right now, as you say,
You've put together that there were some 60 bomb threats, not credible bomb threats, but bomb threats nonetheless, that were called in to polling sites across Georgia. Is that right?
Yeah. 60 bomb threats, many of them attributed, we believe, to Russian sources. None of them turned out to be anything, but it did gum up the works here a little bit. But, Geoff, I think the takeaway story here from Georgia is, despite all of that, this was a pretty smooth election. The Secretary of State, in that same news conference where he talked about the 60 bomb threats, said it was mathematically insurmountable for Kamala Harris to overtake Trump. But at this juncture, there's still a lot of votes to be counted and included.
And those bomb threats, just to draw a line under this Russian foreign interference, these were called into, Fulton County, Cobb County, DeKalb County. These are Democratic strongholds.
Yes. Generally speaking, they were centered around the Democratic strongholds all around Atlanta. There was one down in Brunswick, but that might have been some kind of outlier. But it seems, as if it was some kind of concerted effort. Whether it had any impact in the end, I can't say that would be the case necessarily. It might have.
Still do not have a race call in Georgia, though, for this state. Is there any sense from statewide officials of when we'll be able to make that call?
Well, it's going to happen pretty quickly here. I think they have on the order of 90% of the numbers in. But the remaining votes to be counted are from heavily Democratic enclaves all around the city of Atlanta. So stay tuned. We should know fairly soon, I think.
Just because it's close doesn't mean that the 7 swing could all swing together. And we'll see if that happens. I think it's too soon to tell. I am, because I focus on what's most relevant, I'm focused on New Jersey. And New Jersey went for Joe Biden by 16 percentage points, and it went for Kamala Harris by 4 percentage points. So New Jersey is not exactly the Republican sweet spot. And I'm struck also, Derek Thompson is an excellent journalist at The Atlantic, said, we've seen a lot of red arrows, rural places going more Trumpy. But he says the biggest Trump gains were in Miami, Chicago, New York, Dallas, and Houston, in big cities. And that is surprising to me. But then you add it to a third thing, and this is an exit poll. I never know how to take exit polls. NBC, in their exit poll, that 1/3 of voters of color went for Trump. And so you add all those things up. New Jersey, cities, voters of color shifting a little to Trump, and you wind up with Trump realizing the dream that a lot of Republicans have been talking about of a multiracial working class party.
All right, can we just do a quick reset and put up the electoral map and see where things stand at almost 12:45 a.m. Eastern here on the West Coast?
We're on the East Coast.
I'm sorry, on the East Coast.
It feels sometimes.
I will say, the couple of years I lived in Los Angeles were terrific.
With you,
actually, if we were on the West Coast, this would be fantastic.
This would be great.
I would be so fresh.
But it is a great time. That's right. Let's check back in on the national
union there. Now, so then let's say Nevada.
Lisa, can we come back to you in 1 second?
Sure.
Forgive me, I'm sorry. We have some developments over at the Harris campaign. Let's go to our Laura Barron-Lopez. Actually, this is Said Richmond, a former senior advisor to President Biden, now a key advisor to Kamala Harris. Let's take a listen.
Good evening, Howard. Good evening, HU. I want to say good evening to all of the Harris campaign, the campaign family. Thank you for all that you have done. So you won't hear from the Vice President tonight. And go HU and go Harris. Thank you all.
All right.
Right, Amna. Well, the statement didn't go down very well. Even before Cedric Richmond came out to address the crowd, it was already thinning here at Howard University because some of the latest calls seemed to really put a damper on the mood here. And so a number of people were streaming out of the yard here at Howard. And as soon as Cedric Richmond said that the vice president would not be speaking, people started to stream out.
Laura, we're going to let us know if you need to step away for a drink of water again. In the meantime, what else can you share with us about, as you mentioned, some of the crowd thinning out over the last hour or so? Has there been a shift from what you can tell among supporters there?
Yeah, I mean, the mood, Amna, is one that is very anxious and nervous. Supporters are still holding out hope that the blue wall is going to come through for Harris, that Nevada will come through for Harris. But again, they are really upset that it's coming down to this narrow pathway for the vice president. So far, there isn't that much pointing of fingers in terms of the Democratic sources that I'm talking to, because the Democrats in those blue wall states are still trying to keep optimism going in terms of her pathway there. But we still, as you well know there, we may not know until into tomorrow how that vote count is looking in those blue wall states, in Michigan, in Wisconsin. And so that's created, a sour and sad mood here for a number of Democrats.
That's our Laura Barron-Lopez at the Harris watch party there, which is now ended, it seems, for the evening in Washington, D.C. Back here.
The mood here is as on fire as it has been all night long.
And William, there's a bit of news that we can share, and we should say that while some of the other TV networks have called the state of Georgia for Donald Trump, the Associated Press has not. And I'm going to read here directly from my computer because this is important. It says, Donald Trump, this is from the Associated Press, Donald Trump is leading in Georgia, but the AP decision team still sees a path, albeit a very narrow one, for Kamala Harris to take the lead in the state. Harris is bettering Trump in the votes cast before Election Day, and there are still potentially enough of those kinds of votes left to be counted to push her ahead of the former president. The race is still too early to call.
Enormous margin, but we're now at 78% coming in here. And to give you a sense of Philadelphia County in the past, where Harris is compared to the past, hold on, let me get the right button. Look at this. So right now, she is behind where Biden was in Philadelphia, which was also behind where Clinton was. That's not where they want to be. She needs to do better than this with the remaining vote in Philadelphia in order to do well here in Pennsylvania. I'm also
going to continue our coverage here. So here I am again, Amy Walter.
Wow,
Let's
so we
continue.
here I thought I had a break.
Right.
I was really looking forward to that.
Same.
So anyway, I think sometimes it's not even.
That's a major race call in the state of Georgia. We can now report, according to the Associated Press, that has gone for former President Trump. And here is a look at where the national electoral map now stands. Former President Trump.
Faiz?
Well, we'll see how the outcomes of this go. I look to the House and the Senate. Trend lines are not great right now for Democrats, but hopefully, things could turn. Wrestling with the Trump presidency with House and the Senate, which is one possibility, to be clear. There could be a number of other possibilities, but the amount of disruption that is we're on the cusp of, is not imagined at that point. If you got that much power and that authority.
Well, she's sort of got to run the table, and she's behind in all the states right now. So she'd have to catch up and go ahead in all those states.
So I went to the New York Times map, and they've got this neat little feature that shows shift from 2020. And I wish I could show it to the audience, but the red that is on this map is what's sobering, given everything I've said over the last 5 hours. I do think that this race is always going to be close, that the vice president's path, even though they were hoping maybe North Carolina, maybe Georgia, that it was always going to be through the blue wall states. So the fact that we don't have those results and she's told folks to go home is not surprising to me. But assumptions are being challenged in this election. And this map here says to me that no matter what happens in this election, no matter who wins, we as a nation have to have a conversation about why this map looks the way it is. And I hear all the things about economics and populism and things like that, but we also have to factor in some social issues that could also be at play. Why they voted the way they voted. And I'm not sure if people are willing to be as honest as I would like them to be, to talk about why this shift is happening. It's so broadly as I'm looking at this map.
Judy, you're looking at the same map.
I'm seeing it over Jonathan's shoulder. Yeah. It's very red. We don't know the result yet. We're still waiting for these states to come in. I'm already thinking about unifying the country. To what extent, and were people asked in the exit polls, who do you think will do a better job of bringing us together? I know that's been asked by pollsters for the last few years. And in most cases, the Democrat would win that by some margin. But half of the country, or almost half the country, is going to be unhappy with this result. What does that look like? What is the leader, whoever it is, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, what are they going to say to the American people about that? Are they even going to address it? So I'm already thinking, what happens to the country? What happens to people who didn't vote for the winner? Where do we go from here?
And Harris is up by 2 points. How does that compare historically? It's not great. It's not good for her. It's good for Donald Trump, where he is outperforming both 2020 and 2016.
William, we should say that a TV network, Fox, has called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. The Associated Press, however, says that several 100,000 ballots are left to be counted, and a flip is still possible if most of what's left to count is advance vote. Give us a sense of what's happening in the room and bring us up to speed on your reporting.
If you had gone to me 45 seconds ago when Fox News made that call, I wouldn't have been able to hear a single word you said, because this room erupted with as loud of a cheer, a raucous, ongoing chant of USA, USA, as we have heard all night long.
Not going to pull it out.
Yeah.
She's 10
in Wisconsin.
Yeah, she was about 10,000 points behind. So, looking at the places where you could have seen House Democratic pickups, they haven't quite materialized at the rate at this hour that we would have hoped for. Not to say that we know definitely what the outcome will be, but we had hoped that it'd be a little bit cleaner at this point about the House. And, if you were playing that game that everyone always likes to talk about of, would you rather be us or them? Right now, obviously, you'd rather be Trump.
We should reiterate here that only Fox has called Pennsylvania for former President Trump. The Associated Press has not. Therefore, we have not. No other network has. But when you look at the blue wall, Harris needs to run the blue wall to get to 270.
She needs to find a lot of votes. She's down by 3 and down by 6 in Michigan, which is kind of surprising, though there's some of the big Democratic counties are still out there. Mm-hmm. So that'll tighten. But down by 4 in Wisconsin. If you had told me that the gap in Wisconsin and Minnesota would be the same, I would have been surprised, because Minnesota's a pretty Democratic state. And so it's just, there's not much more you can say, but there's a prevailing wind in this campaign, and the wind is touching pretty much everywhere.
prevailing wind, which I hope shifts. I mean, she has to win the blue wall. And it is my fervent hope that that call by the other network is it's 1:30 in the morning. I can't even think anymore. But it is my hope that the AP will flip that.
Fox was premature.
That Fox was premature, and that she hangs on.
And if she doesn't, we could be looking at it. Sounds like we're saying a Republican White House, Senate, House.
The House is going to be really
Supreme
hard
Court.
because we've got, between California and Oregon and Washington, there's so many races out west and Nebraska. So it does feel a little bit too early. I haven't been able to look at all the math, but it's probably right now that Democrats are up 1, and overall, but they're probably going to lose at least 1 Michigan, if not 2, and so that will even it back out. And
if your team lost, your instinct is to start blaming the voters. And it's always useful to, in my view, the voters are not always wise, but they're usually sensible. They know their own lives. They make sensible calls. And so instead of rushing to blame them for this or that, just humbly, like, what are they trying to tell us here? And usually there's a valuable lesson in there.
As I understand it, is outside of what the Harris campaign election night headquarters used to be. She's joining us from a parking lot. Is that okay? Oh, actually, no, Laura, you're still there. You're still there. So bring us up to speed.
I'm still here.
Okay. So bring us up to speed.
Yeah, so as you can see behind me, Geoff, the yard, which is where the election night event for Harris had been set up, has entirely cleared out because after Cedric Richmond said that the vice president was not going to be speaking tonight, people just started streaming out. She is expected to speak. Look, the campaign has gone almost entirely quiet at this point. The vice president called a lid. Her pool did, so we aren't getting much from her vice presidential office side, and the campaign has not been sending really any more updates in terms of what they're watching closely.
Everyone is waiting on tenterhooks at this point for the former president to show up.
I'll interrupt you here just to share a bit of news, which is that Fox, and only Fox, this one network, has declared former President Trump the winner. Associated Press has not called it, therefore we are not calling it. No other network has called that, but that may have been what triggered this response we're seeing now.
I don't know if you can hear that behind me through this microphone, but that is now what is on the screen behind me on Fox News, on these 2 massive screens here in the room. Fox News has just declared that Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States.
Just a level set for our audience. I know you're fighting a lot of noise in the room there, but it's coming up on 2 o'clock here on the East Coast. Only one network, Fox, has now said that former President Trump has won the presidential election. The Associated Press has not called this race. There are still a number of key battleground states they have yet to call. No other network has called it at this point, but that is the reaction you're reporting on there in the room, correct?
Everyone here thinks this race is now over. As we are reporting and other journalistic organizations are reporting, that is not the case yet. Again, in the course of our conversation, in the course of our broadcast this evening, it may turn out to be that way. But thus far, it has not been declared that. As Laura was reporting, the Harris campaign certainly believes that they have maybe the most infinitesimal chance, but a chance still, that they could eke out some final victory and get some of those remaining blue wall states. But according to everyone in this room, that ship is passed. Trump is the next president.
And kick us off here. We're in a very unique position here, we should stress, in which a number of people, maybe millions who are watching Fox, believe that this presidential race is over. We have not called that yet because Associated Press has not called it. No other network has called it. There are still a number of key states to be called. But what are your...
For Pennsylvania itself, where are we? Still 94% of the electoral expected vote, and we're still at about 200. We've gotten a few thousand votes in, not very much since I last talked to you, but still Kamala Harris has to find 200,000 votes in this state, and really there are not a lot of spots where she can go. As I said, in Philadelphia.
Looks like millions of Americans believing it's already over.
Well, I expected Trump to declare victory tonight, no matter what. But I didn't expect that he'd have some cause to do so. But we're in the normal Trump world where, I think a normal candidate would wait for all the networks to endorse, but he doesn't play by those kind of rules. So it's welcome to the future.
Jonathan?
Well, I come to elections with a sense of humility, simply because, polls don't vote, people vote. And so in elections, we finally get to hear what the American people have to say. And I've come to this election with an open mind, and I want to know what the American people have to say. What was it, 6 hours ago, I was mystified by what was going on. And now I can't help but think that if this election if it proves out that the millions of people who are watching Fox News, if that ends up being the case, then I can't help but wonder if the American people have given up on democracy. Simply because I'm looking over your shoulder, right now Donald Trump has 51.2% of total votes. 51.2.
Judy,
which is better than he had in the previous two. Was it 48%? Is that right?
When was the last time a Republican got 50?
Just a couple things. Number one, this is not where we thought we would be. I think many of us thought this election could go on for a day or two or three longer. As David just said, here we are. We could be knowing the result within hours. Better just to let the voters speak and see what happens. And we're going to know soon enough. I mean, we see where the arrows are pointing, but we don't know yet.
Well,
shake things up.
Faiz, how does that fundamentally upend the rules of politics such that Democrats know them and have known them?
Well, I want to be, as David mentioned earlier, be humble about learning and challenging our own assumptions. So one of the assumptions for a lot of Democrats was the gender gap would work to their advantage. To a degree it didn't, but it did. But, if you think of it, the Biden win in 2020.
Amy Walter, is there any place where Kamala Harris is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020?
I was just trying to look at that because when I look at, and again, I'm not going into this county level data, just looking at every one of the states.
And as you're looking, I should say, we have the live shot up of the podium there because we expect Donald Trump to come out and address his supporters literally any minute now.
Just to see that, this looks a lot more like what we saw in 2016 than what we saw in 2020 in terms of states that we consider pretty blue: New Hampshire, Minnesota, Virginia, places that Biden won by really big numbers that you kind of assumed would follow suit if at the very beginning of this conversation when David was talking about blues getting bluer and reds getting redder. But in this case, there wasn't enough of the blue getting bluer, even in blue states.
All right. And we should say that Fox was first to call Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. So too are ABC, NBC, and CBS. We here at the News Hour are not, because the Associated Press has not called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. Kevin?
About that, this idea, if Donald Trump does win, what happens to the Never Trumpers? Especially if he winning the popular vote.
All six of us, I could call them.
Meet in the same phone booth.
Yeah, no, I do think, I would say among the Never Trumpers I know, a lot of them are Democrats now. There are very few who have remained and Republicans, and I think this result will only confirm that decision and shift people over.
Here we go.
Here he is.
Donald J. Trump, First Lady Melania Trump.
As Donald Trump takes the stage there, we can now report that the AP has called the state of Pennsylvania for former President Donald Trump. He's taken the stage there with his wife, with his son Barron, with his running mate J.D. Vance and his family, and also the Trump adult children. We're going to go live now to Florida, where former President Trump, is expected to speak.
Together we can truly make America great again for all Americans. So I want to just tell you what a great honor this is. I want to thank you. I will not let you down. America's future will be bigger, better, bolder, richer, safer, and stronger than it has ever been before. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Former President Donald Trump addressing a room of supporters on this election night, and we should note, declaring himself the winner in this presidential race. The Associated Press has called Pennsylvania, which now brings Mr. Trump to 267 electoral votes, which is not yet over the threshold of 270 that he needs to win, but it is quite close. Just as a reminder, the races still to be officially called are Arizona, Nevada.
Folks are exiting out of the room, and I think we're about to lose you soon.
That's right. The people here, honestly, I think, are still in a little bit of sense of shock that they came here expecting a long night, not really thinking that the race would be virtually decided by this evening. All arrows, as we've been reporting, pointing in that direction. I can only also imagine, though, that for the other half of the country who is watching this, the people who are aghast at the idea that we are on the cusp of electing someone who waged a violent riot against our democratic process, who calls climate change a hoax, who spread racist lies about immigrants throughout this campaign, who has emulated dictators and says he would like to perhaps be one. I imagine those people watching this have to be equally in shock as the supporters of Donald Trump are shocked at how things turned out for them this evening here in Florida.
His first term, he implemented and oversaw what has to be one of the darkest chapters in modern American history, and that was separating children from their parents forcibly for the purpose of separation as a deterrence. So I'm not, Jonathan?
I'm not as optimistic about these natural limits that David's talking about. To William's point, I'm part of the other half of the country who's shocked, given all of the things that Kevin said. But to be honest, there's also a part of me that's not shocked. I mean, for a lot of people, this will be 2016 all over again. And for me, it's not. Because I lived through the 4 years of Trump's administration. I remember what that was like, and I just have to say that this is a sobering moment for me as an African American, because things that he said on the campaign trail about giving power to police to do all sorts of things that would loop me in potentially to being have an encounter with the police that I didn't ask for. As a gay American, I'm concerned because that's the conservative supermajority on the court, particularly Justice Thomas, in his concurrence with the Dobbs decision, said, you know what, we should go after Obergefell. So which legalized same-sex marriage. So my marriage is on the line. As a journalist, I'm concerned because just 2 days ago, he talked about how I've got this piece of glass in front of me, and so if someone wants to shoot me, they have to shoot through the press, and that might not be so bad. But also as an American, I'm concerned because of what we've done to help the people of Ukraine, what President Biden has tried to do in bringing a resolution to the Israel-Hamas war, America's standing in the world, our role in NATO, in the Western Alliance, being the bulwark of democracy. I mean, all of those things are now on the line if indeed he is declared the next president of the United States.
Judy, we heard William, of course, reminding us about the many things we've heard from former President Trump over the years, this idea that he's emulated or showed admiration for dictators, has hinted that he'd like to emulate them, as well as former chief of staff called him a fascist. We talk about democracy and what it took to uphold democracy on January 6th and the days after. And how are you looking at this question right now in terms of what a second Trump presidency would mean?
I think with eyes wide open, I'm listening to what each one of you is saying tonight. I do want to understand better what the voters were saying. I mean, to David's point, I really want to dig in and understand, and not just by reading and looking at the exit polls, but I will continue to go around the country to understand from people, what were you trying to say with this vote? What are your expectations of him? He's made some enormous promises. He says he's going to make the country, he's going to fix the economy. It's already on the way to, it's already moving in a good direction, but he's going to make it better. There's going to be a chicken in every pot. He's going to fix immigration. He's going to fix Ukraine. I mean, he's made a pretty ambitious list for himself. Is the public going to hold him accountable? I mean, are they going to expect him to deliver on what he's promised? I don't know. I noticed at the end, I don't believe he mentioned Kamala Harris's name. I'm not sure.